Oh boy, today's video, it's going to be a fun one. I haven't done this in like years, and I'm going to be doing an overrated, properly rated, or an underrated NBA tier list. We have a tier list of 75 players, or at least a pool, and I'm going to be dropping them into 3 buckets, like I mentioned. So, just a quick disclaimer, I'm going to explain what it means to call these players overrated or underrated before you get angry. So, calling a player overrated does not mean I'm calling them bad. Does not mean I'm saying that at all. Underrated, I'm not calling them like a great player either. For example, if you ask 10 NBA fans, like, where would you rank Russell Westbrook? And they all say the worst player in the NBA. Russell Westbrook is then underrated to those 10 players because he's better than that public perception perceives him as. And on the flip side, say ask those 10 people, where would you rank Darius Garland? And they all say the best point guard in the NBA. We all know that's not true. He would then be deemed overrated. Now, if I ask those 10 people, where would you rank Donovan Mitchell in just a shooting guard ranking? And some people give me 1, some people give me 2, some people give me 3. I would say he's properly rated. So that's all I'm doing here. Now, this is just in my opinion. You might view these players differently. That's the fun of this. So if you disagree, please let me know down below and why. And if you guys enjoy these kind of hot takes, spicy videos, drop a thumbs up on this. And man, oh man, am I excited. So we'll just go from top all the way to bottom. It looks like we're starting off with Steph Curry. I think he's pretty properly rated. We all know that he's the greatest shooter of all time. He's one of the best players in the NBA, and I think winning the championship last year proved it. Some people could have said he's overrated all time because he's had some sick teams around him, but I think winning last year really proved that he's one of the greatest ever. He's one of the better basketball players in the league, and I don't think we've ever really deemed Curry as like the best player in the league because he peaked when LeBron was still doing LeBron things, and then there was some Kawhi love, then there was some Harden love, then there was some Giannis love and Jokic, and we never really said Steph is like the #1 guy in the league, and KD as well. So that could have been a debate also, but I think we all know how legendary he is. He's normally rated. Luka, I want to say Luka's properly rated as well, because I don't think anybody's saying he's the best player in the NBA. Nobody's putting him above KD, or at least I hope not. Nobody's really putting him above Giannis or Jokic. Embiid and Tatum, it's tough. So that's where it kind of gets a little bit slippery there. I don't think he's underrated. And I think it's tough, man. Luka's tough already. I'm going to say properly rated because everybody has him in their top 10. Most people will have him in their top 7. This year alone, you definitely have him in or just outside your top 5, but I don't think anybody's saying that he's the best player in the NBA. I mean, you might be Matt Stone, you might be a Luka fan, but I think we all know that he isn't, so he's going to be normally rated. Dame, I think, is underrated. Now, there's been a new generation of point guards. You've had your LaMelo Balls, your John Morants. I mentioned Darius Garland before, Trae Young, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and we all kind of forget about Dame. Now, it's because of the playoff success. He hasn't been to an NBA Finals. He's been to, 1 Western Conference Finals back in 2019. So that is a perfectly good reason to knock on him, but I feel like he's having, like I say this in a lot of my videos where I talk about Dame, like a very quiet 30-plus point per game season. He's having some crazy offensive games, and I think he's underrated. Now, it could also be the market size. That could also be a factor into some of these. Like, there could be some players that are overrated that are playing in LA or Golden State or New York, and then are underrated that play in Memphis or Charlotte or Portland. So yeah, I'm going to say Dame is underrated. This doesn't mean he's better than players I put in the overrated tier. It's just, I think, like, maybe some people would take Ja over Dame or Shai over Dame, and I still think we got to give Dame that love. So speaking of Ja, I think Ja's overrated. Yes. There was a poll. Shout out to NBA University. He had it there. And it was Ja Morant, I believe, versus Pascal Siakam. And it was like 73 Ja, 27 Siakam. And I think we need to like maybe pipe it down a little bit. And when you're on Twitter, there's a lot of younger people who definitely are more attached to Ja. And I perfectly get that. I just think Ja, like I personally would rather have Damian Lillard. Now maybe this season, like Ja's proving it to wins, or his team is having more success. But then again, if you put Dame on the Grizzlies, maybe we'd see this reversed. I'll say it now. I'd rather have Dame than Ja right now. But that doesn't really mean just because he's overrated and underrated. That's just my personal preference. I do think Ja's a little bit overrated, just a little bit. I don't think he's massively overrated, but I do think he's, yeah, just a tad. It's crazy. Trae Young, I would have said, is overrated. And now he's becoming, I think, underrated, man. I do. I know we knock him on him for his defense. It's tough because I think people overrate him and I think people underrate him. So does that perfectly rate him? Does he go in the normal tier? You know what? I still think Trae's a little bit overrated. And hey, I'm a Trae guy. I said I was Trae over Ja going into this year. I'm definitely going to backtrack on that and say that I was wrong, and I'm going to go Ja over Trae. I still think Trae is probably a little bit overrated if you do take into account his defense, maybe his inefficiencies this year. I mean, he wasn't an all-star, so you could say, yeah, man, he's actually probably underrated. Oh, man. Because people were taking De'Aaron Fox over Trae. People were even talking to the Jalen Brunson Trae talk. You know what? I do think Trey's underrated. This does not mean, like I say, like I gotta keep bringing this up. This does not mean Ja or Trey's better than Ja. I think Ja is better than Trey. Trust me. That is my opinion. But I do think Ja has turned into a little bit of an underrated player. De'Aaron Fox. I think De'Aaron Fox is still underrated. No, I think he's getting towards properly rated. He was an all-star this season. I think people are realizing how good De'Aaron Fox is. He was one of my 5 players that I love going into the year. I will also have to pick up this tier list. We're only, 6 players in, and we got about 69 more to go. Nice. But yeah, De'Aaron Fox, I think, was underrated going into the season. All-star, though. Kings are good. Going normal rated. Tyrese Halliburton. Oof, man. I want to say overrated, but I'm going to say normally rated. Because like he's really good. I don't think anybody's like jumping the gun yet on him, but if he has like a similar season next year, we might see that. I think Darius Garland is underrated. I think he should have been an all-star. And that could like also take into effect, like this is, I can use all-star as a good parameter for this because all-star is a popularity contest. And if you don't make it, maybe you're not as popular, but you might be a better player. Drew Holiday, I think forever will be underrated just because he's not like a flashy scorer. He's played in small markets throughout his career after Philly. He was in New Orleans and now Milwaukee. Won a championship as like the second best player at that time, better than Middleton, so he's underrated. I think James Harden, we know what he is now. I don't think like, I think maybe when he was in like towards the end of the Rockets days, we could have said overrated, even maybe the Brooklyn days, but I think he's normally rated now. I don't think anybody's putting James Harden in their top like 10 players list, or he's borderline there, which is fine with me. Jalen Brunson. Kind of want to say Jalen Brunson's underrated the season he's having, but that might be a Knicks fan bias to me. I'm going to say normally rated. Marcus Smart. I kind of want to say Marcus Smart's overrated, but he just won a depoy, so he really backs it up. It's just I don't love his offensive game. He's a tough one to rank. I think we know what we're getting out of Marcus Smart at this point in his career. I think it's also, this comes into account with a lot of the younger players because we haven't either seen them in the playoffs, or maybe this is just like their first year breaking out. So people don't know if they want to jump on the bandwagon and say like, I want to see more out of it. So it's tough. I'm going to say like we know Smart now, so he's normally rated. I think Chris Paul's a tad bit overrated this season. It's looking like this is the year that he's going to just drop off a little bit. We've seen it the whole year. I mean, injuries have happened. He's overrated. I also think LaMelo Ball's overrated. Now, he hasn't been dealt with good teams. The Hornets have not done a good job building around him, and I will give him the benefit of the doubt there, but they're one of the worst teams in the league. He's had his injuries. I'm not getting to the point where I think he's a good stats, bad team guy, or he's going to put up empty stats. But I think if like Charlotte builds a better team around him in the offseason, and they're probably a playing tournament like they were last year, next year, I could see it. But I think like LaMelo is probably a little bit overrated in the league. I think McCollum also might be overrated. He's a good veteran. He's having a weird year for the Pelicans, and definitely not what we've seen in the past for him in Portland. But I think he's just a tad bit overrated. I think Devin Booker is underrated. I saw Kyrie Irving was like beating that same poll I referenced before with Siakam and Ja, and I think Devin Booker is becoming underrated because like if you asked any NBA fan, or most of them going into the season, better shooting guard, Donovan Mitchell or Devin Booker, everybody was saying Devin Booker. Now it's Donovan Mitchell. Now Donovan Mitchell has had a better season. He's also been on the floor more, and he was an all-star starter. Booker got hurt, didn't even make the all-star game, and everyone's saying Donovan Mitchell, which is fine. We could backtrack on that, but I just think like we can't switch up on Devin Booker so much, and like everybody's saying like, I don't know. I think Devin Booker's underrated. I think he's definitely the most underrated player on this list so far. Yeah, so let me know what you think about that. Going into the season, I would have said Donovan Mitchell was underrated because everybody was writing him off after the Jazz playoff series, but I think he's now back to normally rated. I think Shai's entering the possible overrated tier, but I won't say it just yet. So he's going to be normally rated. He's having an incredible breakout season. I'm loving everything from him. I think Jaylen Brown's underrated. He's putting up 27 points efficiently, plays good defense, like on the second best or on the best team in the league as the second best player. He is underrated in my opinion. I do think Kyrie Irving, I was going to say underrated, but I feel like now just over the past couple of weeks, I've been seeing like so much Kyrie love over some players that maybe he shouldn't be. So I'm going to say he's here in normal, but he's getting close to overrated. There's a chance I might do like a close to overrated, close to underrated tier at the end of this, and I'll break it up. I think Paul George, I think he's properly rated. I think we know about him. I think Brandon Ingram is underrated. It sucks that his injuries have happened. I think Anthony Edwards is underrated. He's been the best player on the Timberwolves. I think he needs more love. Like I said, it all can come back down to market size. He's in Minnesota. If he was in LA, people would be taking him like number one in the top 25 under 25. That's how crazy he would be. I think Desmond Bane is underrated, but I think a lot of people are calling him underrated. He might go to properly rated. Wow, I'm doing 75 of these. Like, you guys are probably going to disagree with a lot just because it's 75 players, which is fine. I think DeJounte Murray is underrated. I think he's like asked for a completely new role in Atlanta now. While it hasn't had the most team success, I think he's done a pretty good job holding down his own. New system, new position, playing with Trae Young. I think he's done a good job. Still being efficient, good defender. Yeah, underrated. I think like Zach LaVine was overrated for the longest time. You guys knew that. I was not a big Zach LaVine and D'Lo guy. I looked right on D'Lo. I definitely looked wrong on LaVine. I think we know what we're getting out of LaVine now, and I think he's normally rated. But he's somebody that could be very polarizing if you think he's overrated or underrated. Maxey, I think Maxey's overrated, but I think it's really just by Sixers fans. I don't think it's by the rest of the league. Bradley Beal, he's probably properly rated, yeah. We know what we're getting out of Beal at this point. Tyler Hero, he's underrated, yes. Now, I don't think Tyler Hero is better than anybody really up here. No. But when you ask people, like, if it was Poole, if it was RJ, if it was Hero, it was kind of evenly distributed, and it should have been Hero. People, like, he's an unlikable guy in the NBA to other fans than he fans, and I totally get that. And that's what kind of makes a player underrated sometimes, because he's underrated in my opinion. I do think Jordan Poole is a tad bit overrated. He's on one of the more popular teams in the league, so this is going to happen, and he's overrated by Warriors fans. I want to say somehow Tatum is underrated, but I think Celtics fans will bring him up to normally rated. Kawhi, probably this season, Kawhi is, I don't know, because you could either, I feel like you could be two ends of the spectrum. You could be like, he's completely underrated when he's healthy, when he's like fully ready to go. He's one of the best players in the league. And then you could be like, all right, like, he's just never healthy. So you could say he's an overly rated. So I think there's two sides of the spectrum for Kawhi. And I think we appreciate his greatness and what he's done in the past. And we know he's going to come with injuries. So I think he's normally rated. I don't know. That's a tough one for me. I think Jimmy Butler is still underrated. People will kind of knock his regular season play, but we know Jimmy turns it up a notch when it comes to the playoffs. Next up, we have DeMar DeRozan. I think he's turning into a little bit of an overrated, I don't know, man. Because he's definitely turned his career into like a whole different way in Chicago. I think he's normally rated. That's fine. Andrew Wiggins, he's a little bit overrated. Definitely throughout the NBA. I mean, like when he was an all-star starter, that's the definition of overrated last year. It's kind of dwindled down this year. OG Anunoby, I think all the trade hype overrated him just a little bit. Great player. I would give up multiple first-round picks and a young player for him, but I think we've gone too far, maybe the OG hype, because of the deadline. Middleton, I kind of want to say Middleton's overrated. I mean, he's always been underrated in Milwaukee, but I think he's properly rated now. Franz, oof. I think normal. He's still young and developing. I don't think anyone's jumping the gun too much on Franz yet. Mikal Bridges, I think he's underrated. I love Bridges, man. I really do. I knew he had it in him to be a good scorer, and we saw it before the All-Star break where he dropped 40 plus for the Nets. I'm very excited to see him, and then as he's probably going to be like the number 1 or number 2 option in Brooklyn, he's probably going to go to normally rated very soon. Lauri Markkanen, I think people are giving him like his flowers this season. I don't think anyone's calling him like a top 20 guy in the league, but most people are calling him most improved, which is good with me. So yeah, he's going to be properly rated. RJ, I think he's normally rated. I think people realize that he's inefficient. He has his inconsistencies, and you're probably not building a team around him, which makes him a normally rated player in my opinion. I think Knicks fans even realize that, and they're not overly rated, or they're not overrating him. Now, Warriors fans, you can come back to me on the Poole Wiggins talk, Sixers on the Maxey talk, which I'm perfectly fine with. I can admit I'm wrong in these. I don't have that big of an ego with this. It's not the end of the world. I will say I'm wrong. I'm perfectly okay listing that. Bojan, probably an underrated player. Yeah, what he's doing in Detroit, I mean, it's not resulting in the wins. Keldon Johnson, I think he's underrated over in San Antonio. Dylan Brooks, I think he's normally rated. I think people obviously hate him for good reason. But even if he's a lot of hate, like I think he's down to normal. I don't think he's an underrated player. Buddy Hield, hell underrated, man. Hell underrated. I'm surprised like teams weren't really trying to get him at the deadline. Giannis, I'm saying he's underrated. I think like for the last 3 years, 21, 22, and now 23, he's been the clear-cut number 1 player in the league, and some people still don't want to give that to him. And like, I might, like over the All-Star break, I was just reading a lot of Giannis stats and watching a lot of Giannis stuff, and I think I might be ready to give him MVP. And I know I just tweeted out like last week that Jokic is my MVP, but I'm ready to zag. I'm ready to do a 180. Just what he does on both ends of the floor, man. And like, I think his playmaking is just getting better each year. I think he's underrated. I honestly want to say like what we take, like LeBron gets too much hate just because of the GOAT debate. So he's forever going to be underrated. KD, I think we all agree KD's greatness. He's normally rated. I think Zion's a little bit overrated. I think people are starting to probably properly rate him. I'm gonna say he's overrated just for now because of the injuries. I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is becoming it's tough because he's in Memphis, so you don't hear too much about him. He was an all-star though. Yeah, you know what? I might say he's overrated. But he's going to win DPOY, so this doesn't mean he doesn't deserve it. He's my DPOY. I'm fully giving it to him. I just think, yeah, maybe some players in Memphis are overrated. Joyce Randle, I think he's overrated. Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, if you want to, like, I'll say RJ Barrett's overrated, but I think people realize he's not very good, so that would normally rate him. So, yeah, I think, yeah, I'll throw RJ up there as well. I'm not afraid to admit that. Like, Brunson, I threw, where did I put Brunson? Did I put him properly rated or underrated? I gave him a normal, like a normal rate. Bankero, he's a rookie. I think he's fine here in the normal section. Cat, I think people realize Cat's flaws. Enough where I think he's normally rated. Kuzma, I think he's fine as well. Jeremy Grant, I think, is an underrated player in this league. I mean, he's played in OKC, he's played in Denver, he's played, which is weird, Denver's kind of like a smaller market team, but not as small as like OKC, Portland, Detroit. So I think Grant's underrated. Aaron Gordon, underrated, man. He's having the best year of his career there over in Denver. I think Evan Mobley is normally rated. This man is an insane defense. You know what? I think he's underrated. I feel like we got to talk about his defense so much. I think what Al Horford does for the Celtics will forever be underrated, or just what he does for NBA teams. Draymond, I think he gets so much hate that he's underrated. What he still does on the defensive end goes like, it's just, I mean, like, people talk about him, people realize that, but I feel like he's like a guaranteed Hall of Famer, and people don't even want to say that yet, which, I mean, people don't like his personality, and that sometimes makes a player underrated. I think Scotty Barnes is a little bit overrated. Yeah, if we're going to go Mobley down and underrated, I might go Scotty Barnes and overrated. Jokic is still underrated. Is he though? I mean, because Jokic, I feel like people aren't putting him as like the #1 player in the league, like overall. Regular season, yes, like MVP 2 times in a row, might get a 3rd this year. He's been very efficient for the Nuggets, and he's leading them to the 1 seed. He's been to 1 Western Conference Finals, which was in the bubble, so I think people are hesitant to give him that #1 player in the league stature because he's never won the big one or even been to the finals. So you know what? I think Jokic is actually properly rated. I think if you ask like 10 Sixers fans, he might be underrated, but for now, I'm going to put him in normal. Embiid, I'm going to also put in normal as well. AD, I mean, the injuries happen enough where I think he's normally rated. And I think we know what we get out of AD. Bam, I think Bam's still underrated, what he does on both ends of the floor, and he's getting better and better each season. I think Siakam's an underrated player, having the best season of his career, and wasn't an original all-star. I think maybe he should have deserved it a little bit more than Randall, but the Knicks did have a good record, so I see that. So Sabonis, I think, was underrated going into the season, but what he's done for the Kings this season, I think people are realizing it. He was an all-star. Brook Lopez, underrated, man. He's underrated in Milwaukee. Jared Allen, I think Jared Allen will always be underrated because he's not a flashy guy. So I think people got to talk about that Cavs front court just as much as they want to talk about that Cavs backcourt. Wait, did I have Mitchell in this tier? No, right? I have Mitchell in the normal rated because I have Garland, Mobley, and Allen here. KP, I think KP's underrated. Like, people wrote him off after like kind of the failure in Dallas. He's having arguably the best season of his career this year for the Wizards. Time Lord, I think might be a little bit overrated. Man, if you asked me this like a year and a half ago, I would have said for sure underrated. And the contract makes him underrated, but I think just like his availability, and I think we overrate his just talent a little bit too much. I think Rudy Gobert, throughout the Utah tenure, was underrated. And because people didn't really like Rudy Gobert, he wasn't flashy, but I think he's normally rated now. I mean, honestly, the trade alone, I think Minnesota might have made him an overrated player. Yeah, because they gave up one of the worst packages ever. Aiden, I think Aiden's overrated. Like, public perception, he wouldn't go for that much in like a trade. I'm sure like Brooklyn maybe didn't even want him in a Kevin Durant trade package. Miles Turner, he's underrated over there in Indiana. Christian Wood, I think he's a little bit he's such a talented offensive player, but it's such like a flip on the defensive end. You know what? I honestly think Christian Wood, I mean, I think like GMs do value him a little bit less. He's a tough one because I think he's overrated by the fans, but he's underrated by like the GM. I guess that means I'll put him in normally rated. And lastly, we have Nick Claxton. I think like this is his breakout season, where I don't think he's over there. I think people are realizing that. Like, he's been in that DPOY combo. So I'm going to put him in normally rated. I think I'm going to zag on Jaren Jackson Jr. And I think people honestly underrate his defense. Yeah, completely doing a 180 on him. So this is what I'm going to go with. It was just kind of my initial thoughts. I threw a bunch out at you guys. 75 different players. I said, like, if they get too much hate, maybe because of personality, that can underrate them. If the fan base is so popular and so vocal, it could overrate the players. So let me know what you guys think. Like I said, I'm not calling any of the players in overrated bad, or I'm not calling the players in underrated better than those guys in overrated. This wasn't really a ranking. It's really just their public perception and where they are in people's rankings and tier lists and stuff like that. This was a tough one to do, so I'd appreciate you dropping a thumbs up. My head's kind of spinning after because it was 75 different players. Let me know what you guys think down below. Love you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.